My name is Sherry Guess, and this is the Heavily Metalled Podcast. On this podcast, I interview patients, medical professionals, and industry insiders, having important discussions regarding the all too commonly experienced but lesser identified symptoms of hypersensitivity to metals contained in implanted medical and dental hardware. These metals often cause a variety of dysfunctional immune responses, chronic pain, and other syndromes that fly under the radar of most patients and physicians. During these interviews, the patients and I discuss ideas for managing symptoms, share personal lifestyle modifications, and talk about how to advocate with and educate providers pre- and post-surgery, along with options found for implant removal and the how-to of adverse event reporting. This podcast does not give medical advice. From time to time, I may interview medical professionals that render personal opinions you can use to follow up with your individual provider. Let's roll. Hello, metalheads, and welcome to the jungle. Thanks for coming back today for this edition of the Heavily Metal Podcast. Our guest today, I'm really excited about. We have Gilda Capraro, who is the brainchild behind the Low Nickel Diet and Lifestyle group on Facebook that is over 7,000 strong. They provide valuable information to support a tight-knit community of people that struggle with systemic metal hypersensitivity. Some more, some less. So welcome, Gilda.
Thank you. It's really exciting to be here. And I admire everything that you're doing, Sherry. So.
Oh, you're so sweet. I've been trying to get her on forever, y'all. So we are very fortunate today that it has finally happened. The stars have aligned. Maybe it had something to do with the eclipse. Did you get to see the eclipse up there? I'm all eclipse minded right now.
It was cloudy, but I live on the 12th floor of a suburban apartment building, and I can see right down to Lake Ontario. And over downtown Toronto, I got to watch from my balcony in the rain the sky change. And that was almost more exciting than staring at the sun.
Awesome.
It was just all clouds, right?
Yeah, it was super cool here. It got completely dark, and like we had clouds, but it opened up just at the last minute, so that the whole eclipse, 4 minutes or whatever, that was completely clear. It was really cool.
I've seen pictures, and we didn't get any of that. We were supposed to, but we didn't. But one time in childhood, I saw what you guys saw, so I'm like, my last chance, but at least I saw it once, so that's good.
I'm sorry. It makes you feel really small. I will say that. We are very small and insignificant in the whole scheme of the world and the universe. Let's get right to it. Tell us about who you are, where you're from, as well as your life and your hobbies before we get into the meat and potatoes.
Okay. I'm a daughter of immigrants. I live in Canada, Toronto, Ontario, Italian immigrants. And why is that important? Because they experienced a lot of environmental changes and not just culture shock when they came to Canada. And that kind of plays into my story. So at the moment, I'm a retired social worker. So I worked for almost 30 years as a social worker / psychotherapist, sometimes program manager. I ran a couple of drop-in programs for street-involved youth. I've been involved with immigrant communities and refugee communities and all of these. Again, my work informs how I deal with my own experiences and how I have to look after my body, because I came from a family of storytellers. And to this day, even in my work, I go for the story, right? I'm really non-dogmatic. I like to learn new things and new information about people. So that's been both a blessing and a curse.
Yes.
But yeah, truly. And I have a nickel allergy. So that's a metal hypersensitivity. I've had it probably almost since birth, because I guess it was recognized in my family when my ears were pierced, because back then, other Italians would pierce their daughter's ears and plug in nice, solid 18 karat gold jewelry, which it's like almost pure gold. It's almost 24. So it was considered that certain kinds of metals are very toxic, right? So they're like, oh, no, this is better. You'll never get a rash from this. Guess who got a rash? So now my dad was accusing my grandmother in Rome, who sent me these earrings, of sending me inferior merchandise. But I routinely reacted to even gold from very young. That's my point. So it was understood that it was probably the nickel alloy in the gold that was causing the problem. So I would have like reactions to bracelets, to the snaps on my onesies, the big safety pins they used to use in cotton diapers. It just started so early in life that I don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know how to pin it down. But on top of that, I have other chemical and metal hypersensitivities. So let's call it all an allergy. We can clarify down the road the difference between the two types of allergies, the immediate response and the delayed response. So we fall under the adaptive immune system delayed response. Once we become systemic, that delayed response sometimes is pretty quick. So really all to say that we talk a lot about the systemic nickel allergy a lot. And that's new because before I set up this Facebook group, in North America, nobody ever talked about SNAS. There was one other group that did, but it was very much focused the other way. It was important for me because now, all these years later, when I finally got a proper diagnosis and a template on how to deal with the set of flare-ups I was having at that time, I realized that all the foods that I thought I was allergic to are all the high nickel foods. So for me, it explained a lot, but it also made me realize that I was probably also very systemic as a reactor my entire life. So fast forward, like I've had what they thought was atopic eczema. It probably still is because sometimes the three things go together. The atopic march, contact allergies, and now we know also histamine intolerance or mast cell activation. Often these things ride together. So in my body, they were riding together probably my whole life. So you can imagine that the poor coordination issues, all the IBS and all that stuff had all my life been misdiagnosed at one point in my mid to later adulthood, very much gaslit by a lot of doctors or told that my symptoms were psychosomatic. And so by the time we figured things out and I found like a really amazing group for the patch test, eczema and contact dermatitis Facebook group, they were a godsend for me because there were people in that community that were having the same experiences as me, both externally with their skin, but also internally as a result of either a metal hypersensitivity like nickel or cobalt, or also other kinds of contact allergies. The more they play out in a more straightforward way, like balsam of Peru, like scent chemicals are also systemic because that group of things come from nature, and plants typically have about 2,000 different chemical components aside from the nickel, because nickel is naturally occurring in most vegetables. And
let me ask you how you made the connection. Did the idea of nickel in food start with you, or how did you make that connection? Where did that come from?
Oh, okay. So I think I'm going to have to share a list of websites that always get lost in the groups. So through this eczema and contact allergy Facebook group, I learned about the Dermatitis Academy. And if you go to their website, what's really fantastic is that the individual, a doctor from, I think, Loma Linda, California, she herself has nickel allergy, I believe, and a couple of other contact allergies. This website has a board of directors. They've been funded to do different work. It feels to me like they're a little bit dormant now, but 8 years ago, it was like, oh my God. So they talk about all the chemical and metal hypersensitivities. And then it moved over to it's also in foods. And then there's others as well. So that's where I got really excited because, again, that also began to mirror what I was experiencing. I have a really amazing allergist who normally wouldn't see people like me only because there were very many great allergists in my community to deal with the quote more normal stuff. In childhood, I also had asthma and the borderline anaphylaxis, but not really. So because a lot of those issues had already resolved, and there's reasons for that, which we can get into a little bit later, she didn't really see a need for me to go to one of the top specialists in Canada, which we're blessed in Toronto. A lot of them work here if they don't run off to the States. She said he deals with very complicated cases. And yes, you're complicated, but it's not that usual linear trajectory of complications because you don't have the asthma risk factor. But what she didn't realize was that I worked diligently on my diet since about 1992, like elimination rotation diet. So I think I was clearing things up almost by default because I would often go almost to carnivore. The more foods I eliminated, quote, the better I felt. And so it cleared up the asthma. Let me tell you, it hasn't cleared up the sinus stuff, but really cleared up the asthma. So she wasn't even sure if this office would take me because he was like in the heart of the city. I was out in the suburbs. But he saw me and he was like really intrigued by all these weird symptoms. And he's, yeah, they're definitely connected. But then he went off to do some kind of something and passed me off to his colleague. And she was very nice, but she was fresh out of medical school. And I kept saying, all these foods are bothering me. We did the prick tests again, and only one or two came up as an IgE or an antibody mediated allergy to the protein in the food, but it was very mild. It used to be worse before. And so I was like, the prick tests are failing. What I learned later, and she didn't know what to do with, was that I was having a really bad reaction to the control, which is saline. So I had to go off for blood work to make sure that I wasn't, they measured the IgE levels in your blood and the IgE levels to specific foods. But it was very popular then. But now they're also saying that, yes, it's great and it's medically sound, but not as sound as the prick test if the prick test is done right. And you're going to hear done right by me a lot. She was flabbergasted. She's, I don't know why you can go and eat an arugula salad or picked fresh from the field and have a florid reaction within like maybe 4 or 5 hours. That steadily got worse. Like 2 days later, it'd be even worse. She's, it's like a drug reaction. And then that's the word that got in for me because I do have reactions to drugs as well. And I was like, if I'm reacting to the food the way I'm reacting to the drug, something's going on here, right? It has to be the same mechanism. But I knew squat about the immune system. Like I didn't know that there were 4 different pathways, and I didn't know a T cell from a whatever cell, but it's stuck. And that's how my brain works. I have a lot of training in critical thinking and also come from a culture where things have to be logical. And Italians are really good at seeing patterns in things. They don't get credit for this. That's why they're such great designers, right? And that's just how my people are. Even in my own background, many became doctors, but a lot of them became artists and writers and music, right?
And sculptors.
And
a lot of great Italian sculptors.
Yeah. And so I thought, let me use my God-given talents that came from my family along with the science that I'm starting to be able to dig up. So that's how it started. And I kept going back and saying, no, it is something in the food. If it's not the protein, it's something else. So I started doing all the research in that and discovered oxalates and histamine and way too much information that didn't make sense until I saw that website from the Dermatitis Academy. And I'm like, okay, it's all here. How come nobody knows?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So is that when the Facebook group started, and how long ago was that? What gave you the idea to start the group?
So 2016, I had to seek out a new allergist and all the people were retiring. The minute I got handed off from the big hoo-ha specialist, and I'll tell you how big of a hoo-ha he was or is, he and his father were, who was also an immunologist, were instrumental for getting latex banned from hospitals here in Canada.
Oh, wow.
Ahead of the US.
So he's a big cheese.
That's a big cheese, but very humble. The thing was, I wasn't, quote, sick enough for him to do further investigation. Sure. Around that time, 2015, 16, 17, my parents were not doing well and they were in a retirement home. One of my cousins, her parents were not doing well, but her father was really sick. And I learned that he went to the same immunologist to investigate why he was having allergic-like reactions after chemotherapy. So this guy was also on the cutting edge of looking into mast cell activation, but nobody talked about it then. And so he stayed low-key because our healthcare system here is publicly funded. So until they can gather a body of evidence of good peer-reviewed literature on certain things, they will not talk about it. But a good doctor will still keep investigating with their patient and use their knowledge to guide them. And he had a really good peer that I went to many years before who had told me, this was in 1982, on a vacation in Mexico, my tongue swelled up. The Mexican doctor said, it's not an anaphylactic reaction. I came home and the guy said, it's not an anaphylactic reaction. And I said, then what is it? And he said, it's a delayed reaction. Okay. Sound familiar? You're a delayed reactor. But I didn't understand that a delayed reaction is on a whole different part of the immune system. They might study it in school, but they don't really dig into it because allergy, as it's understood, especially in North America, means one thing, and that's an IgE-mediated immediate reaction to the protein in your cat's dander or in the pollen in the air.
Contact or
not contact. They call that environmental. And then the alternative health gurus have a whole other meaning Right. So the waters kept getting muddied, but immunologists always knew, and Dr. Oh my God.
Zyrus. Yeah. Dr.
Yeah,
Zyrus.
Zyrus. So he knows that this information is known, and he's been very upfront about it. They did not know how to communicate this other side of the immune system that is our burden to patients. And this is generally how, especially in North America, it works. So the IgE allergies, I just call them the normal allergies. But
Yeah. So hang on. I want to go back just so I don't miss it. When did you start the group? How long ago?
January 2017, with 24 people that I skimmed off of another group.
Okay.
That Facebook group, and God bless her, Barbara, the admin, before her, there was nothing. But people in that group were incredibly focused on only the superficial things. Like, yes, we discussed systemic nickel. Yes, we discussed diet. On a broader scale, all we were really concerned about in there was makeup and nail polish. And
from your experience, you knew it had to be bigger than that. And that's why the group was born.
Yes, because with this type of allergy, because metals and chemicals surround us, because nickel especially is very ubiquitous in our environment, the only option that really worked for me was total avoidance, like a complete zero tolerance detox your environment. That won't protect you from the dog you decide to keep, because that's a different type of allergy. That's a better known allergy. But this other stuff, like when you go into your kitchen and you have a brushed metal fridge,
brushed nickel, brushed stainless
fridge. When our kitchen is full of nickel from our cookware, the refrigerator, the stove, your kettle, your little handles on your cupboards, just your kitchen alone, it's like a toxic nightmare or a exposure nightmare, because we don't have to be toxic levels of nickel in our environment to have the allergy. It just takes one chance meeting. It's like love at first sight. You might not even realize, but the second time you see the person, then you're like, yeah, that was love at first sight. That is exactly how this type 4 hypersensitivity reaction works. It's that sneaky, I think I'm having a reaction, but you never do on the first contact. So I like to use, like, that's the positive spin. The other spin is, think about poison ivy, systemic or skin contact allergy. Skin contact is how it normally manifests. Those of us who have internal reactions to nickel, we can get it from our implants, if we have any implants, braces, surgical clips. But the majority of us are actually reacting to the nickel in foods. Without having had a prior reaction, it's not really an issue. It's that second exposure that becomes important. So I learned in 2016, I didn't know any of this before that.
Right.
And so this didn't, in my view, in the other groups that existed, and there were a couple of smaller ones. Barbara's group was quite large. There were a couple of smaller groups where, again, it wasn't discussed enough. But in the larger contact allergy group, these things came up. It's just that there were so many other kinds of contact allergies being discussed. And then I was also a member of the other contact allergy groups specific to my other confirmed by patch testing chemical allergies. So I was getting confused.
What do you feel that your group brings to the table that's missed by the other groups that are focused on metal hypersensitivity?
Two things. When I first started it, it was only supposed to be about the diet, how to keep nickel from getting into our bodies. I had very severe eczema. It wasn't caused always by ingesting. It was caused by contact. And this hand in particular still acts up when I hold my keys. That's got nothing to do with being systemic, but I am systemic. I'll tell you why. I hold my keys today, even in the opposite hand. My right hand, which is the worst one, starts to get itchy. But I can eat a plate of spinach and the same thing happens. And I get a reaction on my neck. That is exactly where I used to wear my 18-karat gold chains that contained nickel. And that's why Italian gold used to be so prized, because copper's soft, nickel is hard. So they use the nickel to make the gold durable. And so all this precious stuff I couldn't wear anymore. And even years after no longer wearing it, I can eat a high nickel food and end up with literally the trace of my gold chain. You'll just see this rash, like bumps. So what is that? Did food cause it? No, my nickel allergy caused it. And so it's different there. I need to avoid the higher nickel foods in order to avoid the systemic reactions and get rid of the metal hardware I might have had in my body. So I learned it all in 2016, and I believed what I was reading and understanding, but I had a hard time accepting it. And that's why I created the group, because a lot of people thought that the low nickel diet was bogus, but it's not, because Barbara also put me onto the Facebook groups in Italy. And I'm like, okay, I'm Italian speaking. It didn't even occur to me that there would be Facebook groups in Italian. And she goes, of course there are, because all the research is being done.
And I think Europe is so far ahead of the US and North America as far as their research into nickel and metal hypersensitivity.
Yes.
I'm going to go back for a minute because I want to really focus on the resources the group brings before we talk about all the extraneous stuff. You have a massive files section. I haven't even read it all. Tell me, give a brief overview of what's in the file section for people who are just coming into this.
Okay, so in the file section, we have a number of resources, some of which have been lost because Facebook made some changes. And so what I thought were safe PDF copies of things weren't, and they're gone. So I have to work on revamping them. But there
Such as? I'm curious about that.
I don't even remember today.
Like things that they said went against community guidelines, or?
No, because they were just changing, like moving away from certain kinds of files. So if you do a proper PDF file before you upload it, it stays. If you were using one of their internal tools to create the file, that's what's no longer good.
Okay.
And because I was going through my own health struggles the past 18 to 24 months, I couldn't focus to save my life to fix some of that stuff. You don't even have to go through all the files. And again, it's a failure of Facebook that you can't just like zoom in and find things easily. But what do we have? Number one is the Italian low nickel detox diet, which I adapted from the Italian groups. And it's not a diet, it's a template on how to implement an approach to detoxing nickel from your insides. So that's one really important one. There used to be, and I'm not sure if there still is, but there should be also a soil map in there, a US soil map. The majority of our members are from the States, by the way. So we have lots of Canadians like me as well, and UK, and a few from other parts of Europe, Australia, New Zealand. But the bulk of you are in the States.
Okay.
And why is that important? It's important because I need to find ways to better serve the American community. So as I've found things in the first year or two, like these beautiful maps that explain where the high nickel soils are located in the US. At that time, it came in really handy. But in our featured posts, one of my longtime, almost from the beginning, co-admins, Joanne, developed the exciting Nickel Navigator app and also the Cobalt Companion for people who are allergic.
I didn't know that Joanne was actually the brains behind that app. And isn't she also the brains behind the Rebelytics diet as well?
It's the same thing. So her website is Rebelytics, and the two apps are hers as well.
Wow, fantastic. Joanne's amazing. Shout out to Joanne. Way to go, Joanne.
But we were also inspired, again, by the Italians, because the bulk of nickel allergy research that comes out of Italy, one of the doctors that's involved in some of the key studies from the beginning on the dietary part, like on SNAS and the dietary connection, had developed an app. That was the predecessor, but she never updated it. Joanne was collecting data for her own purposes. And she's a scientist, so she knew where to find the numbers and knows where to find the numbers, and is really great at pulling up research, peer-reviewed research. So for her, it was a passion project for her own healing because she had other things going on. And I think the key takeaway was we need this group to discuss lifestyle beyond creams and medications and arguments around what works and what doesn't work in terms of antihistamines. We need to really dig into the lifestyle. But this is not my group. I started it for someone else who was supposed to take over. I literally fell into it.
It's your group now, my dear.
It's never been my group. When you foster pets and then the cat's so cute, you keep it.
Yeah, there you go. I just took a minute and I actually went into the group here on my phone, into the file section, and I'm going to just run down this list if you don't mind.
Yeah, there's a bunch of other diets in there as well. So
yeah, let me tell you what's here for those of you who are interested. There is an external avoidance checklist. There is SNAS or systemic nickel allergy syndrome survival strategies, low nickel South Beach meal plan, palm and coconuts derivative, a PDF about that, a holiday survival guide, an iron and nickel allergy guide, nickel allergy treatments, sharing is caring, nickel tested supplements, SNAS and the Thyroid by Krista. Now, Krista is a nurse, correct? And she's also a nickel allergy coach. She's also an admin of the group. There's updated SNAS survival strategies, a metal allergy newsletter, several editions of that. L&D, low nickel diet, fiber-rich food, avoidance strategies, another document. Symptoms of SNAS. We've got recipes, meal planning posts, vegetables, biological responses to metal implants, Mayo Clinic dry mouth, World Health Organization nickel document. Let's see, menu and meal plans on the low nickel diet. There's several of those. A community code of conduct. Again, the INDD or the Italian nickel detox diet, U.S. mineral soil mapping. Boy, just a lot of stuff. USA FDA statistics on elements, strategies for eating out, and Italian nickel in the kitchen with the nickel allergy, and a daily food record. So just a massive bunch of resources.
But I've had a lot of negative feedback on the file section. First of all, half of them don't open anymore, like I said. But the other issue is nobody wants to read that stuff. So I
want to read it all. What's wrong with you people?
I don't know about you, but I'm a nerd, so I'll read it all, or at least know where to go when I need to find information when I join a group. I'll go to the files, or I'll look up, and I'm thinking about moving to this format, is using guides. Some Facebook groups have guides and everything's spelled out and everybody seems to know where to find the guides, but they get frustrated with the files sections. So where I want people to go is to the featured post, the pinned post, because there's a document there that says start here. So that's where you start.
Okay, good.
Right? And so the
big blinking lights, start here.
Start here. That's where you're going to find where to get started. So you're going to find the stuff that's in the file section, the survival strategies, and some links to other things, including some of the documents in the file section. So that works better for people. Although personally, when I'm in the group, I will always tell people to check the files, because there are questions that come up over again and your answers are right there. And I get that people all learn differently, but it is really important to be able to know where to access accurate, evidence-supported or evidence-based information. That, in a nutshell, is what you're going to find in the files.
And I can probably work with you to put some of that on the Heavily Meddled website as well, because I get so many questions and private messages about this issue or that issue. And I'm like, guys, my best information is in my podcast. Answering one-on-one is going to not be productive for any of us. But if you go to the resources page on the Low Nickel Diet Group or on heavilymeddled.com, there's a whole list of resources. These questions have been asked before. And if you go there,
even just share a link to Joanne's website, because all the information is there. And she's got a link or a section that in a different format is also in our files to the annotated bibliography with more than 250 scientific papers on this.
Yeah, because doctors are like, where's the studies? Where's the studies? Where's the science? Follow the science. Yeah, here's the science.
It's there. If I could listen, I am not scientifically trained, but I came to research again with this kind of critical thinking skill set, gift, I don't know. And also because I did my master's in social work much later after my 2 undergrad degrees. They had gone the business school model, which really benefited me greatly because there was just a whole different way of going about research online, which we didn't have online when I got my first degree. There was no online, there was no internet. But I was taught really amazing research skills and how to just not use Google Scholar, but just use Google to find good, validated scientific research. So I can skim through a Google page faster than anybody. I think that's my other skill. I love Google. Like even from way back at work, they used to call me the Google Queen because the old lady in the room would find good information faster than the millennials and younger.
So let me ask you, does this group focus, I think I know the answer, but does this group focus more specifically on the diet and lifestyle, or have you now grown to focus beyond that as well?
We focus on everything. What I don't do, so in the interest of not burning out, I had to put limits on what I'm willing to do for my audience. Because if there's a way for you to look it up yourself or learn it yourself, my job, and this was also my job with my clients, I'm a very upfront therapist. My job is not to do it for you. My job is to help you arm yourself with the tools that you need to find your answer yourself.
Yes.
So that's from the beginning how I ran that group. People are always looking for skincare products, like a lot, or cookware. Now I live in Canada, and what's available in the States and what's available here is different. What we do share in common with nickel allergy is that there are very few nickel tested for the allergic population products in North America.
Yeah.
So that's why I can't, because the diet is a big part of what feeds systemic reactions. I can't just focus on that because systemically, only about 3 to 5% of the 20% of nickel allergic people have that type of response. So it would be, I think, a little bit irresponsible of me to say, I'm just going to focus on this. I tried. Like in the early days, I'm like, no, let's just talk diet. And when I found things on gut health, and if you improve your gut health, you can get a lot of those foods that were causing problems back and all of that. But people began to migrate from the other groups and find us. And then the same question, what kind of shampoo can I use? Because the Skin Safe app, which is for contact dermatitis, is wrong about nickel. True, because nickel is naturally occurring in the ingredients. So they don't nickel test. They just post the ingredients. And I'm like, but there's another group for the shampoo. Go back to that one. And then I felt bad doing that. So what I started doing also, people who were really unwell, I began to encourage them to check into the Italian nickel allergy groups because their membership is like 25,000 members strong.
There's some real superstars in your group, and they bring a lot of really important things to the table.
Just go look at our moderator list because I'm going to be adding to it. I need to recruit more people from the States to answer those product questions because I can't deny the fact that we've grown, we've exploded, we're growing.
But you cover not only diet, but you cover really the lifestyle thing is pretty broad. You cover products, you cover implants. You're really broadening out to really encapsulate, here's a safe group for the nickel allergic community. And not just the nickel allergic, but metal allergic community. It's not just nickel.
Exactly. Now, I don't advertise. It's a cobalt group out there. I think there's a titanium group out there, and they're amazing.
Interesting.
So there's a formaldehyde group out there, which is a big problem as well. And I'm more allergic to formaldehyde than I am to nickel.
Yeah, I want to talk chemicals in a minute because we haven't even gone there yet. And I haven't gone there for me either. I know nothing about what chemicals I may be sensitive to.
And that's where it gets controversial. If you're having mast cell-like reactions, which is a whole other thing that histamine reactions can very much ride with the type 4 immune response to the particular thing that you're allergic to. In mast cell communities, they'll tell you, don't do this because you might get really sick. But if you're not anaphylactic, you should do it. Patch testing, because that is it's still the gold standard, right?
I want to take a minute and ask you what has been the most surprising thing about the content in this group to you?
Okay. It's more like a top 3. The surprising and encouraging thing is lately, I would say probably since the pandemic, I guess doctors began reading things. And when people join the group, I'm hearing or seeing encouraging signs that how they found out about the the low nickel diet or low cobalt diet, which I think more people were familiar with that one, but how they're finding out about it is through their doctor, either the GP or the allergist. And often in the group, we'll also see the people who brushed off that, it's not dietary. But I'm seeing this big change in the answers to the screening questions before people join. And that is that doctor awareness of this condition has increased exponentially in the last, I would say, 3 years. So that to me is very exciting.
I want to ask you, you just mentioned another low something diet. Low, what was the other diet you mentioned?
Cobalt. There's a low cobalt.
I didn't even know there was a thing. Okay. Guys, the Heavily Metal podcast hasn't gone there yet. I didn't even know there was a low cobalt diet. If you're on a low cobalt diet, I want you on the Heavily Metal podcast. So contact me.
Yeah. So B12, I'm not going to get into the scientific whatever, but B12 is basically cobalamin. And where is cobalt found? Often living next door to nickel, and they like to go shopping together. And so, that was the biggest surprise. And then my other surprising thing is actually a bit of a disappointment. Okay. And that is what I'm finding, especially in our younger audiences, is that everybody's looking for the quick fix. With other conditions and illnesses, I don't see this as much. But in my group, and I call it mine because it is my baby, in my group, I have to say sometimes I get frustrated and feel very disappointed that individuals want all the answers from one group in a very linear way. And Not everybody, because we have some fantastic people that study so hard when they get in there, because now I can see what they're putting likes on and what they're reading and reviewing. Likes or hearts. I get a lot of hearts. We get a lot of hearts. But I am disappointed in something that's happening within our society that drives people to need an instant answer, an instant and simple answer to something that is complex, yet not life-threatening. It's like, you will get better. I'm seeing a lot of this upset over, I can't eat anything. That surprises. But on a positive, because I was able to recognize this, I'm working on, it's encouraging me to work on looking at lifestyle very much from a mental wellness perspective as well. That's the missing piece.
And that can alleviate a buttload of symptoms. And I don't think I've touched on that in some of my recent episodes, but I don't think people realize how much your mindset really can affect your symptoms and make your food. Your mindset can change your food tolerances, people.
Absolutely. Yeah. It won't erase them. It will help you manage them because your brain learns how to manage part of that problem while you're doing everything else. Now, that said, so my third surprise, just how much we've grown.
I'm going to interject. You mentioned that the small percentage of people with nickel allergies that have the systemic component. Guys, if it's 20% of the US population, just to bring these numbers, and I've stated them before, it's going to be 2 million people is the 3 to 5% of the 20% that's allergic. That's 2 million people in this group is only 7,000. So there are millions of people out there that still aren't aware that food and diet and all the other environmental factors play a role in systemic metal allergies.
I'm surprised how much people are suffering that looks more like an emotional suffering at the toll that these allergies take. I am also, again, on the flip side of that, also incredibly surprised and encouraged by people such as yourself, Sherry, who had a body full of metal implants and screws and clips and all the rest of that stuff, that you coped it all. So your resilience and your ability to plan for yourself and advocate for yourself and continue to move forward with each surgery, your bravery. Right.
I'm a fighter. What choice do I have? The choice was to blow my brains out, which, we're not going there. And it could have happened, or to do better and get better and to help other people. You can't be silent when you know what you know. You have to help because you realize that this isn't just a mental thing. This isn't just a PTSD thing. People are out there dying because of their systemic pain and not being able to get out of bed.
And then this is where we get back to the 1 or 2%, right? So basically, if nickel allergy affects 20% of the population, so it's very common then. And then there's this 3 to 5% range of people who are systemic. First of all, I think it's more than 5%, but whatever.
Me too. Yeah.
And within
more like 50%, but that's me.
The dietary experts, the nutritionists that do understand this problem, they'll disagree with us, but I think it's higher. And they have science behind them. One of your guests talked about how some reactions are more temporary. And I guess it comes from the field that I worked in. I worked with teenagers and young adults, that last developmental phase before they have to really be grown-ups and brain development slows down. And so sometimes it was our last chance to get in there and get them on the right road. That's how I'm feeling about my warriors who are dealing with so much more than a skin reaction, right? Because it mimics so many other things. There are people who've ended up in wheelchairs. There are people who have had, not mimic, but triggered thyroid, Hashimoto's thyroiditis and goiter. And it's been, right? Not me. Okay, clinically, I'm not. But once every 10 years, I get a temporary goiter and then it goes away. And by the time we finish all the testing, all my labs and testing are all in normal range. So what is that?
My thyroid was the size of my hand. It was supposed to be the size of my thumb. My goiter was massive. I got a free facelift when they took my thyroid out.
But I also, but I also know why this would happen to me, because there's a seasonal component to how my reactions play out. And we can talk about that in a minute. But I just wanted to say, the surprises have been numerous and many, but I wanted to be very upfront that the lack of willingness sometimes on the part of members to really take the mantle and do their own research so then they can come back and maybe be the next moderator. My other big surprise is how well everybody gets along in this group. I think we are relatively drama free compared to what I've seen there in the Facebook universe. That's a testament to the drive on the part of the very active and engaged members, because it does take a village. And what happens is a lot of stuff that may go over my head because I haven't been in the group myself for a few days, either it gets reported or somebody deals with it in a really nice, polite way. And by the time I see it, it's either gone or dealt with, right? Sometimes I leave little conflicts up because sometimes it's actually important to see where points of disagreement might happen if it benefits the bigger cause, which is how to do self-care. Because that is really what my group is about. How do you manage your self-care in light of an allergy that's poorly understood, but your body's telling you you need that?
Yes. Do you have any medical providers in the group?
Yes, they lurk. They will never participate. They can't give medical advice. We had one years ago who was maybe an intern, but was on secondment after the internship to a research lab. And that individual was willing to speak up because they were not in the role of a medical doctor at that point. Even though they had the license and all of that, they were doing something else. And they were very clear that it was always the science says, the medical literature says. From the beginning, I have said, don't sue me. I have a license in social work. Do not call my licensing body. We call it actually certification here. We don't call it license. But do not call my certifying body to complain about me for dispensing medical advice under the, I don't call myself a social worker in here. I'm just a admin. But I'm very careful that we should never give medical advice to each other. We can use terminology like, this is what worked for me. This is what my doctor says. I found this study. Joanne has this amongst her 250 studies. That's the language that I like to encourage, and I see it a lot. So that makes me really happy. Because ideally, I want everybody to follow the science and understand that good science is never dogmatic.
So that leads perfectly into, you shared with me that you feel like the low nickel diet is considered a secondary approach and not a root cause. Kind of explain that to me and talk to me about some of the different ways we can look at elimination diets as an approach and not a cure. Move into testing.
So, and I say it's not a root cause because the allergy itself, the exposure that led to the body mounting an allergic response is the root cause of other symptoms besides rash. But the rash itself could be a systemic manifestation from the inside out because of what you ate or what medicine you took or what the heck ended up in your lower colon that shouldn't be there from the metalverse. So ideally what I'd like to see is this, that people get supported or support each other in a way that opens up everybody's minds to possibilities, that there is no wrong or right way, where people don't get stuck on like questions like, why do all the lists conflict? Or because if you really look at most of the sources, whether it's a blog, whether it's another group, whether it's a printout that your doctor gave you, what you're going to find is that there's more overlap than difference. So I'm not even sure why we're constantly getting this barrage of, but all the lists conflict. And that's why sometimes I look like I'm being a little bit confrontational. Show me that list. Like, where did you find this information? Because I need to understand what choices we have to make. But the truth is all elimination diets work if you make sure that you eliminate the nickel heavy hitters. You don't know, you don't have to be this strict. Why the strictness is needed for people who are like super reactive and have a lot of different symptoms. We need a period of detox. We need a period because nickel itself, from what we ingest, builds up in the body, and we may not react at all for a day or two until in our digestive system, because the intestines and the colon, big long process there happening, right, for digesting and absorbing nutrients. Nickel technically is a nutrient. So if you keep adding more and more nickel, you fill your nickel bucket, and then you end up with a florid reaction. But you're never going to know which one food caused it because it was never one food. It was the element in that food. But here's the good news. If you do a well-constructed elimination rotation diet, you don't even have to label it as low nickel, right? Because the diet itself. So for example, a Whole30 diet. So for people, there are a lot of people out there that are familiar with the whole Whole30 craze, and there's a website, and she's made some modifications to the approach. But a lot of the foods that you have to eliminate to do a really good Whole30 elimination diet are high in nickel. They're high in nickel, they're high in oxalates, they're high in lectin, of course, sugar, which that's another thing we can talk about another time. But so once all those things are eliminated, basically what you're left with is meat and vegetables, right? But only certain kinds of vegetables in our case. So once you look at that vegetable list with everything else eliminated, like grains and rice and brown rice, that's the change. Some people, when they do Whole30, they will keep rice in for medical reasons. But all to say, if you do a really well-constructive, evidence-based rotational elimination diet, you're going to solve half the problem because it gives your body time to detox, not just the nickel, but whatever other chemicals or compounds are riding with it, like oxalates.
And then for people that have an MTHFR mutation, that could take a little longer as well. But
exactly. And so while you're doing that first 30, so ideally, now in Italy, this is how they do it. The beginning part of the detox period, let's say even up to a month, do not add supplements. Remove all your supplements. People think they're going to die if they remove all their supplements because there's been, thanks to social media and every other kind of heavy-handed North American marketing, we have been convinced that we need protein supplements, that we need every diet, every vitamin out there. We don't. So I want to be able to support an environment where it's understood that we can be our best doctors by taking a step back, calming down. Let's look at the situation, right? Forget the celery guru. Like a gallon of celery a day is not going to cure you. It could kill you before it'll cure you. Forget those people and just focus on a well-constructed whole food diet in its simplest form for you.
And now, a word from our sponsor. Attention metalheads. Are you struggling with skin rashes, joint and systemic pain, or fatigue that just won't go away? Type 4 metal allergy is often overlooked as a culprit in many of today's chronic illnesses. Get to the root of the problem with MALISA testing. MALISA is a scientifically proven and clinically validated test that measures immune reactivity to metal allergens like nickel, cobalt, and titanium. With fast and reliable results, you can get the answers you need to find relief and live a healthier life. Don't let metal allergies control your life any longer. Visit malisa.org to learn more and schedule your test. Trust us, you'll be glad you did. MALISA, a valuable diagnostic tool in medicine.
And that's where the Nickel Navigator comes in. You can zero in to the most low nickel foods. The INDD, the Italian Nickel Detox Diet, you just follow it as a template. You don't need to count anything. Why? Because on the low side, so there's 3 columns. One is like low. Even if you eat 7 meals a day, you're still going to fall in your total nickel uptake below the sort of threshold of 150 UGs per day, that's the buildup in nickel in your body, above which, if you go above that threshold, that's where you're going to start to experience reactions. But we also know some of us are more like 75. We need to go below 75, right? That's where things like carnivore diet comes in. The meat is naturally very low in nickel. How you cook it matters. So
there's the histamine thing.
Yeah.
They're not letting it sit in the refrigerator. There's
ideally, that is all I want to focus on. We have some amazing like implant groups, very well supported. I don't need to cover that. I could just send everybody over there. Don't leave us, but go over there to learn the nitty gritty, because I will never have that surgery because I don't have those things in me. I got rid of my wires. I can't get rid of my bridge work. Got rid of my mercury nickel fillings eons ago. But even just getting rid of this wire, the 2 wires, and the bridge work is still there. So there's some metal there, but it's more inert. massive reduction in inflammation inside my mouth and in my sinuses within 2 weeks. That's enough to scare me to say, you're not having hip surgery. It's like, if that is what's going to happen to you on a massive scale, you're already, like you said earlier, Sherry, like, I'm not going there. So I have to figure some things out myself. So while I'm figuring my own things out, I want to encourage people to ride this journey with me, because what I'm also seeing is where the real conflicts lie when it comes to diet and nutrition. So there's just too much information out there. Mm-hmm. People want to fit a template. People want to say, okay, I was reading Dr. William Davis and he says, this isn't good for your gut health, but that is high in nickel. My answer, because I've turned into a hard-nosed, like, upfronter, I'm like, so don't eat it. No, and there's nothing to eat. What do you mean there's nothing to eat? So I will challenge people frequently in the groups on, let's look at our thinking. Like, why
try having a nickel allergy and alpha gal where I can't eat anything sourced from a mammal. That takes out a massive swath.
Exactly.
Don't complain to me if you just have a nickel allergy.
No, but exactly. And I don't tolerate certain saturated fats. So ideally, because I'm pre-diabetic, then I lowered it. So they took it off my chart. Now I'm pre-diabetic again. I don't want to become a full-blown diabetic. For me, what works best is intermittent fasting with a high-fat, moderate protein diet. But a lot of animal-derived saturated fats and fish do not agree with my digestive system. But the books and the gurus will say, well, I should, like, it's nature's perfect food. You know what? Tell my insides that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, it's getting easier because I did have some people who were quite dogmatic, kind of leaders in the community at one point, and they eventually wandered off. Our bodies are ahead of the science. So I want to continue to move the community forward in an open-minded and embracing way, as long as there is some kind of peer-reviewed, even if it's a case study of one person, but peer-reviewed and replicatable evidence that some of these things work. And that's how the gut doctors like Dr. William Davis, he's an MD, he knows everything there is to know about gut health and which probiotics work. What is his favorite probiotic? The same one that was studied for systemic nickel allergy. And if you take it, it reduces at least your skin reactions from your foods, probably up to maybe 35%, 40%.
I don't want to go down that rabbit trail, but what is that probiotic?
It's the L-reuteri, and I cannot remember the number. I want to say 73 something. I wrote it down, but now I can't find where I wrote it down.
No worries, but L-reuteri. We can search for that in the group.
If you look up, and there's also an L. rhamnosus strain that works well as well. Now, that's what the studies will say. In real life, people are seeing lots of success using different ones based on their own gut health profile, because we're all different. And so what I began to realize is the one that's proven is a great place to start. But once you've got a handle on how your body reacts to the proven one, then you can start to experiment. Like, we should all be our own equals one. I just don't want to see you starting with vegetable smoothies and crying and upset.
Green drinks.
Because you can't, there's nothing left to put in your smoothie because you were doing 12 buckets of spinach. And it's like, but that's why you're sick. And even other communities understand that spinach can be really problematic. So it's not just a nickel thing. Sure. Can you imagine having the nickel allergy, having a compromised gut, and then all these other compounds that are also problematic? You're going to kill yourself, and then you're going to blame the nickel. And all of it.
My pet peeve, overusing essential oils. Come on, concentrated, plant-based. Come on, people. It's not that you can't ever use it, but if you have that diffuser going 24/7 in your house and you're breaking out and you're in pain, and it can also kill your pets, there's moderation in all things, y'all.
I was always sensitive to scents, and I know why now, because that's one of my other, I have a specific category of chemical allergy that contains a lot of these things. So I got rid of everything. And my apartment started smelling really bad. And you can only tolerate bleach and vinegar for so long when it comes to cleaning. So as I healed, I allowed some of those back into my environment. And some of them do not agree with me. And I don't necessarily get skin reactions. I'll get swelling, right, around the eyes. My feet were swelling. And it was an allergic reaction to something in the air. And then I switched to good old fashioned Indian incense, and I was fine.
Interesting. Okay.
N equals 1.
Let's come on and talk about testing. So you feel that patch testing is super relevant for a diagnosis regarding allergic contact dermatitis. Tell me why that is. And then I want to come in and define prick testing versus patch testing and LTT testing versus patch testing. Let's go all things testing.
So thank you for creating the space where I can talk about this thing, because we have to clear up some myths and misperceptions. When it comes to nickel allergy, balsam of Peru allergy, formaldehyde allergy, these are all chemicals. Even metals are chemicals, because it's all on what? The periodic list that you probably got taught in 5th or 6th grade science. I think in my day it was 7th grade. So hopefully the school system is improving, not going backwards. So what is a periodic table? Why does it matter? Because it's the list of every chemical in nature. It was created from nature. It wasn't created from a lab. It was developed, 350 years ago? Allergic contact dermatitis is how the medical community began to recognize that certain things were a problem. So if you picture, for example, poison ivy, you walk into a patch of poison ivy the first time, nothing happens. You walk into that same patch the next time, within, I would say, 24 to 48 hours, you're going to have massive inflammatory reactions, right? So that, in a nutshell, is what allergic contact dermatitis is. Your body has come into contact with something in its environment. You might have even inhaled it, right? And you're going to have a skin reaction. It was never known that internally things could be going on as well, because there's a whole nickel industry, nickel cobalt industry, all these industries. The Nickel Institute is a really interesting website to look at as well. Very well documented, even on their own website, that certain things are going to be problematic for us. Why is patch testing still the gold standard, and what's problematic about it? So what patch testing does is it has these strips of different chemicals and metals. They have standardized tests. There's about 36 haptens. So they're basically the top 36 known contact allergies. And then there's a more comprehensive one, which is the 80. I had one that's in between. There's one. Now, a lot of them are actually manufactured here in Canada, just up the road from me. They make so many that aren't available to us in the States or Canada. The specialized ones are really hard for doctors to get their hands on. And there's reasons for that. But if you do the 80, so it's the NAC, the North American Comprehensive 80, it covers nickel, it covers cobalt, it covers a number of metals and common chemical allergens that also might be, how do I say this, workplace related. Like, for example, there's a cluster of chemicals and metals that typically hairstylists develop. Why? They're not just exposed to the nickel in the scissors or in some of their other tools, but they're also exposed to all the different chemicals in shampoos, conditioners, and hair dyes. So that
my hairdresser of 20 years just had to retire because she's so allergic to the chemicals now that she can't even be in the salon almost.
And we don't hear a lot about that either, but that's a good example of are not especially. So when we see who is affected most by nickel allergy, there's always that comma, especially women. Why? Cosmetics. Why? Fancy
hair products.
Bras, underwires, hair products, all of it. So the patch test will catch all of it if it's administered correctly. Not everybody does it. You need a specialized dermatologist or immunologist. So you seek a referral from your doctor, and if your doctor isn't sure where to send you, that's the first thing you need to look up or ask in the group. Often I can't help. It takes an American to help another American. It takes a Brit to help another Brit.
I have a couple of questions that I want to bring into your thought of patch testing as the gold standard, because I've heard I have never had a patch test. Conflicting information that I've had from an immunologist on the podcast, I'd love to know your thoughts, was that for as far as systemic metal hypersensitivity goes, they made the claim that the patch testing can pre-sensitize to the metals, and also that a patch test it's very good at determining external reactions. It's not very good at determining internal reactions.
Well,
and they've rarely had a positive patch test for titanium. What are your thoughts on all of that? To me, a patch test sounds like torture.
But it's 48 hours of torture and then you're done, right? If you know you're going to get sick, if you have a pretty good idea of how you already react in general, then you don't do it. I had to do it because I had a ELISA test many years ago. And nickel and cobalt came up, but the other stuff didn't. It's more important for me to avoid formaldehyde and semi-important to avoid balsam of Peru, which is another very complex one, which is why I want people to go to the Dermatitis Academy rather than to listen to me ramble. So here's where I struggle. I think what that immunologist was really saying is that in a small majority, these things are going to either result or not. Let's go with the presensitization first. Anything can presensitize you. What the patch test does is confirm that you've been exposed and your body mounted a reaction at some point in your life. Because that T cell activity, right? T cell mediated allergy delayed response. That T cell activity never goes away. It slows down. We can comment. But once those T cells, they're like snipers that have a very specialized job. They can take a nap, but when they're called out because there's an enemy in the house, they go to do their job, but they only know how to do one job. So if they've been napping, they're particularly confused. Why? If that activity is going on in your body already, but it's slowed down, the patch test will bring it back out. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist, but I've spoken to an individual not related to our community with a PhD. I've spoken to doctors in Italy last summer, and they're like, yeah, but what you can do is get a blood test. They're like, the thing is, if you're negative, even with the blood test, and then you get the devices implanted, whatever they may be, you still run the risk of having that same sensitization, but this time to a wheelbarrow full of metal.
Correct.
As compared
Understood.
to this is how it's explained to me. So I'm still struggling with this. And that's why I keep re-listening to certain podcasts, because I don't have the energy to read anymore. That it's, again, an individual choice. If I get to the point where I can no longer walk, I'm having the blood test because I already know what kind of materials are going to be found in the implant that I need. Right?
Yeah.
Because I have to weigh risks and benefits.
So would it be fair to say that for people that have implanted hardware, the gold standard might be the blood test? For people that don't have implanted hardware, the patch test might be the gold standard, and both might glean valuable information for both people.
But at the baseline, if you already have metal in your body, you got to go straight for the blood work, whether it's MALISA or LTT or whatever. I don't.
Analysis,
I have biases, but my bias is on the side of never give preferential treatment to one over the other, because the science keeps shifting, the research and the data keeps shifting. And if your body has nothing in it, the patch test is ideal because it will bring out all of them. Statistically, we people with metal hypersensitivities are 5 times more prone to developing or already have coexisting other chemical allergies. So why do I only want to learn about nickel? Now I'm biasing myself towards nickel and potentially blaming it for everything. What I'd like to see happening in them. Yeah. So now some people go back for more patch testing because they're still not well or still experiencing all kinds of weird reactions. What I'd like to see in other communities is people, when they go and say, oh, I'm still having all this, what's going on? The first question should always be, do you have any metal in your body? Even from us moderators, right?
And then have you ever had a hypersensitive reaction to jewelry or snaps or buttons? Those are my first two questions, always.
Well, absolutely. But it's not two different things. The immune response is identical. It's the certain T cells and certain, I'm not even going to get into it because it's too complicated. I just blame T cells for everything. Because you have this information already via your other guests. Our listeners can go back and re-listen to some
but don't you have to come off of allergy medicine before you take the patch test?
No, I did. I chose to, which is probably why I got that sick. No,
I thought you did.
No, because most of the antihistamines out there are H1 antagonists. So what they do, or H1 blockers, we'll call it that. H1 is where the IgE mediated immediate response normal allergies lives. So your dog, your cat, your dust mites, all of that is type 1. The majority of antihistamines target the type 1 pathway, right?
Okay.
These other reactions, type 4. There is no type 4 medication out there. There were a number of ongoing studies, I think including Dr. Zyrus, were looking at developing these H4 blockers, and these studies went nowhere. We don't know why. And my allergist too, he has a lab that does this. So they had to scrap it. They were told to scrap the whole thing. So we know, in theory, the H1 will not affect the patch test at all, because you've got 48 hours with this stuff glued to your back, right? And there's nothing getting in terms of contact with the skin.
Is that what you mean when you say if it's done correctly? Because I'm almost certain that my allergist said you had to be off of hydroxyzine and Allegra and all the things prior to the patch test. Is that an incorrect misunderstanding? Or are they thinking that the patch test is looking for a type 1 hypersensitivity versus a type 4? Where's the breakdown?
They don't get a lot of schooling in this stuff. And I think that's part of the problem. The honest doctors, and you could ask Dr. Zyrus, he'll say, no, you don't have to go off of it. He's a dermatologist, right? And so I believe the dermatologist before I believe the allergist, because we are testing the skin for the T cell response. So think about your TB test. Whenever last you had a TB test, you get that thing, they stamp it somewhere here on your arm, and then you wait for a reaction. So 12 hours later, there's nothing there. And then eventually the reaction may or may not result, or it's supposed to result in a certain way. Right? Okay. That's exactly how an allergy to metals or chemicals works. And if I'm not mistaken, you don't have to take H1 antagonists with a TB test. Right?
Okay. It's
a different allergy altogether. It's completely unrelated. Sometimes, now then we get into the 1% of the 1% of the 1%. Sometimes in susceptible people, and if you're really unwell, you'll know who you are before you even take the test, right? Sometimes in susceptible people, a type 1 style reaction occurs, right? Because there's crosstalk between the cells of the 4 different immune pathways, because there's 4 of them, right? There's what they call crosstalk. Mm-hmm. So some very rare individuals can have the same kind of reaction they have to when they ingest peanut protein, if they have a peanut allergy. It becomes problematic because anaphylaxis is serious. Peanuts can kill, nuts can kill.
Sure.
Sometimes there's that kind of crosstalk. And so those are the individuals that have to come off of everything. Mm-hmm. But then they also become the ones who are most fearful, because they're like, okay, I'm going to have a reaction, right? If I come off of everything, right, what's going to happen to all these reactions? What if I have a reaction? But your doctor, your provider, whoever's doing the patch testing, they need clean data. And that's why it's important to come off of everything. Because the issue that nobody talks about is interference. But this is why nutrition studies are so problematic, because nobody asks the important questions. They dial around to recruit people. They phone people. They recruit people by phone to participate in a nutrition study. And then they ask a list of questions, but they don't ask what else did you eat. So let's say we want to talk about, does spinach make you sick? But they don't ask what else you ate. So 25 out of 50 respondents said spinach doesn't make them sick. Or alternately, 25 of 50 said spinach gives them the runs. But they also didn't include the fact that they went to Taco Bell every day for a month. And so there are a lot of gray areas. This is my point. If I have to do my whole life and career over again, I don't know. I might have become a medical researcher, because I find all this stuff fascinating. But for me, what's really fascinating is how uninformed doctors are. We can't always blame them, because they covered what they covered in university, right? And they get how many hours of immunology, unless they want to become immunologists, or how many hours of dermatology. If they become dermatologists, no, I'm rolling my eyes, because I'm like, wait a minute. But if they become dermatologists, we have another pitfall. Most of them want to get into cosmetics rather than this other stuff. And none of them want to touch nutrition talk. So I don't know. I'm rambling, but I really, it's not that I don't agree with these people. If I don't understand, I'm like a bulldog, because I just hang on to that bone of inquiry.
I don't want to go into this in great depth, but tell me for a second what a prick test is and how it compares to a patch test and a blood LTT test.
The prick test is only done by allergist to address the classic symptoms of a type 1 IgE mediated allergy. Okay. So that means that your body is mounting a immune response via antibodies, not T cells, but antibodies to protein in that food. So it could be cheese, it could be nuts, it could be.
And we can react with a type 1 allergy and also have the type 4 allergy, correct? Because I think I've been told I have both. Okay. So it can be valuable. It can provide valuable information.
And they'll do that one first. Why? Because there's this thing called atopic dermatitis or atopic eczema, and it tends to ride with, they used to think that it only rode with the type 1 allergy. So you're allergic to your cat, you get a rash. That rash could proliferate even if you get rid of the cat, but it has a shelf life. Like it stops at some point with sort of the standard treatments that are out there to deal with these kinds of allergies. So antihistamine, which then you can taper off. So again, it's always about getting rid of the offending substance or avoiding the offending substance, but it's to the protein. It's very immediate. And in many instances can be quite deadly because you can have an anaphylactic reaction to that substance. The prick test is what pulls all that out. And so basically they do a series of little pokes into your epidermis, and each little pin that they poke you with, they don't stick it in there. It's not like acupuncture, but each one just administers enough of that substance, which is usually in some kind of oil, enough of that substance to provoke an immediate response. Like within 5 minutes, you're going to see it flare up. You're going to get really itchy. You're going to see it flare up. And if it doesn't flare up, you're not allergic. If it flares up, they measure each hive and off you go with a list.
Okay.
So it's pretty.
What do you feel the top contact allergies to chemicals and metals are?
Okay. Top of the top, nickel, cobalt, balsam of Peru. So that would be what's in various scents, perfume, and the plants from which perfumes are derived. A chemist in Britain developed this particular chemical to replace something that was problematic. Over time, they discovered that this particular chemical, it's a preservative, is super problematic, and it's found in all laundry products, like all liquid laundry products. It's in there as a preservative.
And I think also you said formaldehyde.
Formaldehyde. Yeah.
Okay.
So off the top of my head, those are the important ones. So people can be allergic to anything. You could have a type 4 allergy to gold, to titanium. Oh, rubber accelerators is another one, but I would never self-diagnose because the symptoms are often the same. Many of them can be systemic as well, not just nickel and cobalt. Formaldehyde is systemic. It's found in food. Our bodies create formaldehyde. So you really want to get stuff like that under control because otherwise you're going to be in all the time. Yeah.
When we're sensitive to one metal, does it make us more sensitive to others? And can those allergies and sensitivities go away?
No. Working backwards, they don't go away. For whatever reason, nickel allergy is very complex. The cellular activity is a little bit different than with some of the other chemicals out in our environment. It predisposes us to approximately a ratio of 5 times greater than the general allergic population to other allergies. And I think that's what happened to me, right? Over the years. This is why avoidance is very important, why we have to clean up our environments and get rid of this stuff as much as possible, because the adaptive immune system is where the type 4 allergy lives. And the cells that mediate the response, they don't retire. They can slow down, they take a nap for a few years. But if you begin to overload your system again with with insults from either internally or externally from these particular chemicals or metals, it comes back.
I said we'd come back to it. Talk to me for a minute about cobalt and what cobalt allergies look like, since I didn't even know there's a low cobalt diet. I don't know very much about a cobalt allergy, and myself have not been tested Actually, I have. Yeah, my LTT test did not show that I was reactive to
Oh,
cobalt. It did show I had some elevated circulating cobalt ions, which was interesting. Those probably
it's
didn't
probably
need to be
normal.
there.
It's
Yeah.
probably normal based on your
Well,
diet.
I had implants that had cobalt in them, so that was probably normal for me. But what does a cobalt allergy look like? What foods are high in cobalt? And talk to me a little, just briefly about a low cobalt diet.
Cobalt, like nickel, we can call it a metal that lives in the Earth's core. It is often mined along with nickel, so they literally ride together. The interesting thing is that it is also a vitamin. Vitamin B12 is cobalamin, which is cobalt,
Okay.
and it's naturally occurring in certain vegetables and nuts and some meats, not all. Like I think organ meats, it's very high, but other kinds of um, animal proteins, not so much. The high cobalt foods are usually also high in nickel. So
Okay.
what happens is that a lot of people who are not allergic to nickel but are allergic to cobalt, they will actually do a low nickel diet instead of the low cobalt diet and do well. I think
Interesting.
it's
So, what foods are high in cobalt?
basically most of the high nickel foods are also high in cobalt, without exception. However, many people find that they actually do quite well with some of them. So we're talking cruciferous vegetables, cabbages, lettuces, eggs, some forms of dairy. I think yogurt is high in cobalt. Grains, whole grains, barley, oats. Oats is also high in nickel.
Here's an interesting one. I'm going to interrupt you to ask you. So, when I have a lab test, I don't supplement with any B12. My B12 is almost off the charts all the time. My iron levels are typically good. My ferritin runs a little bit on the high side, but I am a carrier of
Right.
hemochromatosis. I don't have it, but I am a carrier. My sister has it. Do you have any feedback on why my B12 levels might be so high? Do you even have a guess?
Well, I think this is where genetic testing might come in handy because it could be a methylation issue.
Okay.
There's different forms of cobalt supplementation that you can do, and I believe one of them has to be there's a pre-methylated something. So that's all I can think of. Or that you may be eating high cobalt foods; they're not causing you problems, so you keep eating them. It might be 12. All of it's been always really good. My iron, ferritin, hemoglobin, B12, and my bone scans are the only things that go well for me, especially before I began to tweak the allergic side of my diet because I've always eaten healthy foods. Always.
Yeah.
If I wanted pie after dinner, I'd have to eat my dinner first. And I really focused on vegetables because that's what they told us to do. I'm a child of the 70s nutrition studies, and it was 7 cups of vegetables a day. Now I've learned that that's
Yeah.
a farce too. So it's a reflection of what you're eating. It's not necessarily something you have to watch out for unless it gets too hot. And if you're a carrier for hemochromatosis, or somebody who has it, what can happen? So you still have to watch your levels, even on the high side.
What myths and misconceptions surround metal hypersensitivity, in your opinion?
You always need a low nickel diet. Like if you have a rash, a few pimples, whatever, which is probably from your cosmetics or something that you're wearing or coming in contact with a computer, touch your skin, you're going to get stuff. You don't need a low nickel diet to deal with the superficial dermatological manifestations unless you get really bad. So you don't need it.
Okay.
Not everybody has to do it.
Okay.
But that was our focus in my group originally. The other one is that antihistamines don't work for contact allergies. They do, but only to a point. It's not a cure. It doesn't slow down your T cell activity. What a good antihistamine does is it reduces generalized inflammation. It helps with itching. It helps with all those other things that the body manufactures, along with the pure core response to the exposure.
Okay.
Those are the top two, in my opinion, or at least we see
Okay.
it come up a lot. And the people aren't ragging on antihistamines as much as they used to. So I guess their doctors are getting better at helping them decide which one is going to work best for their body. Oh, and that histamine intolerance and MCAS are figments of people's imagination, just like fibromyalgia apparently used to be a figment of my imagination. These things are real. And we need to be very supportive of our group members, our general community that experience these kinds of things because they often ride along with, especially metal hypersensitivity. All the reasons why, I don't know. but it's being looked at and taken much more seriously. So that's a good thing.
Why is a roadmap important to address metal allergies, and why and how does chemical hypersensitivity play into the mix? And then what is the roadmap?
Okay, there is no one roadmap. People need to develop their own. Why is it important? Let's answer that first. Without a really good set of strategies, you are going to feel like you're floundering, because there are days when we're going to feel like we're reacting to everything. And we see it time and time again. There are a million different apps out there. There's a million different books out there that focus on self-care. We need to be able to glean from all the best of them to create a daily living plan, a lifetime living plan, so that we're comfortable in our own bodies, so that we're not debilitated by our symptoms. So that's what I mean by roadmap. But you got to start with tools that are known to work. Not all of us need all the tools. It might be a version of a low nickel diet, and there's so many out there. We've got this wonderful new book out there as well. Laura's book is fantastic. She knows, she's in our group. She knows about the Italian detox diet. But she really developed her book for the sort of Anglophone. I'm not even going to say North American, but it's North American focused. There's recipes and information in there that really works for us that live in North America. However, you don't have to do everything by that book. You don't have to do everything according to the nickel detox diet or the Rebellytics website advice. You have to figure it out by using diaries, again, with an app, or I just write everything out longhand. You need to track all your symptoms. So how should that be looking? In my opinion, is not, you track what you're eating, you track what you're wearing. I know it's a lot of work. But it's really easy to do if you do it religiously, because it's a form of mindfulness written down, right? You wake up, you write down how you're feeling. You write down if you've had a bowel movement. Then you track your 2 to 3 meals a day. Eliminate snacking is a big one, and everybody hates me for it, but I'll tell you, do not snack between meals. Just have discrete whole food diets. Learn to cook if you don't know how to cook, and you're going to find wellness. And so,
oh my gosh, I'm terrible. I have to snack every couple hours, or I will get my blood sugar will just like.
That's a whole other podcast. Yeah, if you can't. Most people, once they begin to carve out really nice, clean eating windows and only eat certain foods to support like wellness that we need, I usually do fine. I skip breakfast completely, where like years ago I had to eat at 7 a.m. or I thought I was dying. Track. We have a really simple tracking sheet in group files in order to understand what it is that's really bugging you. Without tracking, you can't develop the roadmap, because these are delayed allergies. Whether it's to a metal or whether it's to a chemical, they're all delayed allergies. Some of these chemicals are in foods like ice cream. If you don't know what your triggers are, and you got to give it 72 hours you got to at least trace back 72 hours sometimes when you have a reaction to something that looks low nickel, but suddenly you're having a reaction and you didn't eat anything low nickel today or yesterday. You got to go back 72 hours all the time. Forward 72, back 72. Rotation, elimination, reintroduction those are the terms, but how you map them out, you have lots of options, because you may also be doing a low FODMAP, or you may also be doing low carb, and their advice is going to look weird or not applicable if you don't document your own journey first. Because once you're documenting what's going on with your body, you go back to their list and they're saying spinach is ideal for iron. You can't eat spinach, so don't eat it. There are other iron-rich foods that are low nickel. So that's what I mean by roadmap. You need to create it. But it starts with environmental avoidance, not with the diet. It starts with your physical environment. Eliminate as much as possible every form of contact with stainless steel and nickel through your cooking. You should have the kind of stainless steel that's stamped 180. That second digit after the slash is the percentage of nickel. And then there's other alternatives that you can find online for cookware. But all of these things are important. No one thing is more important than the other. And if you don't work on your environment, all the diets in the world are not going to help you. And by environment, I also mean your cosmetics. If you're getting a lot of facial rashes, chances are it's what's sitting on your skin. It's not necessarily systemic. Get rid of the makeup first, or replace it with something else. You can find nickel tested products if you are open to ordering from overseas. And there's a few good things in US and Canada as well. I literally live on Vanicream. It's not nickel tested. There's no certification process here in North America. So they don't have to stamp their products with anything. But in mast cell communities, as well as in dermatologically allergic communities, really rely on products like that. They're very pure. So there's lots of ways you can go about things, and all of that forms part of the roadmap. So you have to have a sort of multi-pronged approach.
Tell me your thoughts on how important self-care is on the journey, and what can we do to be gentle with ourselves as we navigate the ins and outs of the allergy? And then also talk about how mental health plays into the recovery and what we can do with that.
From the beginning, really, mental wellness is super important because how we're feeling, the state of our physical bodies really does affect our mental health. Self-care is everything. And we can define it however we want. But I really don't think self-care strategy is nothing like what we see online. I'm still seeing too much emphasis on, if you're feeling low, go eat a chocolate bar, or if you go stuff those feelings down with candy and dessert. No, why? Because it hurts us. So the question becomes, what are we not nurturing? What are we doing? What are we not doing that our ancestors used to do? And basically, our ancestors kept things simple. We've complicated our lives by the sort of consumer-driven need for stuff. And so only certain kinds of cosmetics are ideal, and you have to put on 7 layers of lipstick for your lips to look perfect. I just have 1 layer, no liner. And once you get past that superficial part, you have to understand that the drive to do all of that is also affecting your mental health. Your stress levels, especially younger people, are really being impacted greatly on an almost subliminal level through marketing. And the natural products universe is also doing it. This isn't just limited to expensive cosmetics with nasty chemicals. So self-care, you start with the easy things. It's really easy to say, today I'm not going to wear makeup. Tomorrow I'm going to look for a bra that doesn't have an underwire, a pair of pants that have buckles that are not made of stainless steel. Those are little things that you can do to get you on the road to wellness. But if you don't work on your mental wellness, and I see it all the time, number one, you don't want to do a low nickel diet that's too restrictive if you have a history of disordered eating. You need to reach out to a professional and say, now there's this other thing going on. I really need some support around how to approach a restrictive diet. Make it your own. Back to what I said before, N=1, experiment, be open to it. Don't be dogmatic. Don't shoot the messenger. Don't get upset with the people who are providing you with good information. And it's okay to mourn. You can mourn the lost tacos all you want. You can mourn the refried beans all you want. I did. But at the end of the day, it's going to hurt you.
What are providers missing that will better assist the community?
Honestly, all I can say is I have a piece of advice for all the doctors out there that might end up listening is be gentle and receptive with your patient and listen to what they have to say. If they come with a binder full of actual science, be willing to be humble enough to say, listen, I didn't learn this stuff in school. Let's learn together. That's it.
What are your plans for this great social media group going forward into the future? And have you ever considered a website or group based off the social media platforms that are rapidly canceling groups that don't fit the narrative?
So in the remote future, but hopefully by the end of the year, I'm hoping to have a website with a forum, because then we can put things in discrete categories. Information is going to be a lot easier to find. First, I want to launch a group, and I'm already behind as usual. I want to launch a group just for Canadians, a nickel and cobalt Facebook group just for Canadians, because how we navigate our healthcare system is very different than in the States. We all have problems with certain things in common, but our healthcare systems are so different that we really need a different kind of conversation. And we also have access to a lot of really great stuff that you guys don't have. And when I say great stuff, like food imports, even how we manage our low nickel diet changes. Like, because I can't tell people to go out and buy certain things that just really don't exist in the States, or they do in New Jersey and parts of California, but all the states in between to find certain things.
Anything we haven't covered that you want to touch or share on?
No, it's just other to encourage your listeners to listen to their own bodies without the clutter of all the bombardments of various advice that conflict, right? Just Be okay with things conflicting. Let your body tell its story, because it will. And so I use
trust that when it does.
And trust it. I use mindfulness to get in tune with what my body needs, but I've got 30 years of practice using it. And be open to exploring some of the behavioral apps, whether it's tapping, and I forget how to do that, or whether it's limbic retraining. It all works because it all ends up.
And find the joy in every day. Focus on the positive. My mom said, this is a hat tip to my mom who just passed away, but she always said, you don't focus on the to-do list. You focus on the ta-da list. So it's not what you don't get done. It's what you did today. Ta-da! I washed my face. Ta-da! I took a shower. Ta-da! Today I didn't have a chocolate bar. Ta-da! Today I was able to eat cucumbers.
Absolutely. And to just keep it simple. You can keep your diet simple. There's no reason why you have to have 12 different things on your plate. You will not die of starvation if you eat. Like, you enjoy the things that are available to you at any given time. Enjoy wearing, to the women out there, enjoy wearing bras that have no underwire, and enjoy your body. Enjoy how your body looks, no matter how it looks. So keep it simple. Now, if you need to keep your underwire, then you got to look at something else. Keep it simple, keep it logical, strategize. I don't want to say it, but I'm going to say it. Common sense rules all, right? If it doesn't make logical sense to you, maybe it doesn't make sense to do, right?
10-4. Well, in closing up, you know that I always have to ask, what is your favorite heavy metal band and your favorite heavy metal song?
Okay, Miss Non-Dogmatic, multi whatever. I don't have a favorite genre, but like, I had my two least favorite. Certain heavy metal styles I can't handle. It's not a judgment. It's the way my hearing and my brain sees. But I love the ballads. Nobody can belt out a ballad like old school. So Guns N' Roses, November Rain, I think what it's called. I don't think they're metal, but I just love My Immortal by Evanescence. So I'm going to throw that in, because they're not really metal. They're more progressive something. Then there was Ozzy Osbourne, Coming Home.
Okay. Mama, I'm Coming Home, Ozzy Osbourne. I like November Rain. That would be my favorite out of those two. But yeah, some of the rock ballads are fantastic.
And and I'm a very ballad oriented person, country though, from Europe and from other parts of the world. So for me, my brain can handle it, because there's a set of mathematical rules to this type of music, right?
So Europe, Carrie, remember that song Carrie by the band Europe?
Oh my God. Yeah. So there's, I'm open, but if it just feels like fingernails on a blackboard, I can't do it on a chalkboard.
Oh yeah. My husband likes that Marilyn Manson, Rammstein, all that scramble your brain stuff. I can't do that.
But it all sounds like that to me. And it's a ballad, because there's something missing in the ballad, that even when they go into their heavier metal refrain, it's, this is really nice. Right. It works like our immune system, right?
So the theme of heavy metal allergies might be every rose has its thorn.
Yeah, exactly.
We're back to Brett Michaels.
Yeah,
Brett.
Perfect.
I wanted to thank you, Gilda, for coming on today. We're going to wrap up because we have had a marathon instead of a sprint, but it's all been such valuable information. I look forward to having you back on to pick up where we left off, because I can tell that we have just barely scratched the surface here.
You know what? I want to thank you for having me on, but there is a lot going on, and knowledge is power. But if we only provide short information bites, it's hard to build the knowledge if we have to keep nudging people along. So
I understand. And I try to keep these short, but man, there is nothing short about metal allergies, guys. It just isn't. There's much bigger conversations that need to be had. And that is the goal of us here on the Heavily Metal Podcast. I am going to close, but I'm going to remind you before I do so that we have show notes. We will put links of the things we've talked about in the show notes. We'll put a link to Gilda's group, put a link to the resource pages there, and on heavilymetal.com. Go join Gilda's group if you haven't on Facebook. It is the Low Nickel Diet and Lifestyle Living and Eating Well with Nickel Allergy. Go join that group. and watch you now become overwhelmed. I apologize, but such valuable information there. We'll put that all in the show notes. You can find them on the website at heavenlymetal.com. You can find the resource page there. You can find the petition to sign to ask your providers, your healthcare provider, your hospital, your doctor's office to help circulate this petition to sign to pre-screen patients with metal hypersensitivity, because that will alleviate a lot of those symptoms and hard things that we struggle as metal allergic patients, and it will keep others from suffering the same fate and PTSD that many of us have. I'm going to go ahead and close, but thank you again, Gilda, for coming on. Thanks for being part of the movement to help tell the medical community and the world that we're not going to take it anymore. Thank you for tuning in today. Please don't forget to follow me on social media and to like, share, and subscribe. My primary mission is reaching out to others who may be suffering from hypersensitivity reactions to metal implants and pointing them to resources that can assist with hope, help, and healing. If you know someone that suffers from a chronic illness, you might ask if they have any implanted metal hardware and if they've ever had a reaction to jewelry or metals of any kind. Might not even be on their radar. Visit us at heavenlymetal.com, where you can find images and documentation relating to our show today, as well as a number of valuable resources and links to assist you on your own personal healing journey. Until next time, keep on rocking.